Bună ziua. Hello, Diana. You have the floor.
Great. So then let's start. Thank you again for the DCN team for having us. And I do hope that all of you here will enjoy this 2 days of Rockit and you'll take great value from them. In this session, we will be discussing about the future, but also about uncertainty, and try to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And that is because we are currently living this crazy uncertain times. And you know that saying, right? Uncertainty is the only certainty that we have. And while I strongly believe that there is probably not just one single approach that makes these challenges of planning for the future go away, I do think that in these days, there are no prices for those predicting the future, but only prices for building preparedness for the future. So this will be a little bit of the topic that I want to approach. And on an admin side, you will see alongside my presentation some QR codes. You can scan them with your camera phone if you want. They are usually gateways to different materials. However, if you don't manage to do that, no worries. You can always write back to us and I will share it with you. Now, you know, I love very much stories, but I came to realize that most of the stories we tell about the future, they simply extrapolate from the present. Because we humans are pretty bad at imagining things that we haven't lived yet. And you know, our species is called Homo sapiens, yes? So meaning the wise man. But experts say that being wise is not what differentiates us from other species. There are also other wise species. However, they say that we are most probably the only species that is able to plan for the future, to do foresight, and to prospect the future. So do allow me to invite you in the next 30 minutes in this journey from Homo sapiens to Homo prospectus. Because we are Homo prospectus. Just think about it. Take a crazy trivial example. We check weather forecasts when we plan, or better said, when we used to plan for events, important events of our lives. That is also prospecting the future. That is also doing foresight. And we do that because we have this capacity of planning, of thinking long term. And I know that you might think that there are cultures or maybe education systems where this notion of short-termism is what we see more easily. We see a lot of instant gratification desires. However, recent events, and here I do not refer only to the current pandemic, they have taught us that we need to fight this short-termism and we need to push ourselves more out of the known zone and undertake long-term thinking. Now, I wanted to just tell you that I want to be one of those Homo prospectus. The future is what makes me enthusiastic. And actually, my entire professional activity goes in this direction. I co-founded this company, futureStation, as Arthur was mentioning. And I'm also part of various think tanks on future transformation topics. I'm also teaching foresight. But then what is this foresight that I'm passionate about? And I just want to briefly take you a little bit through the evolution of the methodology so you can see where it came from and how it got to where it is today. In the 50s in the Army, the strategic intelligence teams, generals part of that, started to develop scenarios in order to plan ahead and win their victories. They needed to figure out how can they better prepare to ensure the victory of their army, considering that the competitor, the enemy, could attack them from different ways. So they were thinking, if they come from this side, or if they come from here, or maybe if they come from here below, how can we counter-attack them? They needed to have this holistic view of the map, of the external environment, and they needed to prepare for this different such attack sources. And they could not really afford, right, to just plan for one. So what they did was they started to build strategies based on alternative scenarios. And then this emerged into the different future institutes that I'm also alumni from. And then in the 70s, it was brought to the business world. And the first company that did this was Shell, the oil and gas company. And what they were doing is that in addition to their traditional planning, Shell was developing, and has developed now for almost 50 years, scenarios in which their key assumptions, their key uncertainties are becoming reality. They are making an exercise of transforming those into reality. What if this happens? What if the price of oil increases significantly? And this approach was actually crucial for the strategic position taken during the certain times of the 73 oil crisis, which has some similarities, if you think, with the current situation that we are seeing these days. So future preparedness through scenarios also contributed to the fact that in only 2 years, from 73 to 75, from the 8th biggest oil and gas company, Shell became number 2. And of course, currently this has evolved in many different ways. There are a lot of methodologies, a lot of consultancy companies, and a lot of internal practices in companies or jobs in this respect. But I want you to remember the very important fact about foresight is that it helps us investigate the future, not predict it. We just investigate the future through the foresight methodologies. And I will share some of these methodologies with you. But just think of the famous underestimation that was made in 43 by a brilliant mind at that time, the chairman of IBM, Thomas Watson, when he thought that there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. So what happens is that if we underestimate uncertainty, this can lead us to strategies that neither defend against the risks nor take advantage of the opportunities that might arise on the market. Now, if we look at the foresight process, in a full process, we tend to cover 3 dimensions. The first one is when we try to understand the past. What type of factors drove change? What black swans, we hear this term a lot these days, what black swans have occurred? And why it's important to do that is because we need to recognize patterns. And we need to first look back in order to be able to look further. Then what we do is that we scan in order to collect insights about the present. And here we look at trends, at mega trends, at innovations on the market. And we do that through a horizon scanning methodology. I will tell you a little bit more about it going further. And then we vision. We try to understand how these trends will impact the future and how the future might unfold in different ways. And one of the most known methodology to do that is scenario planning that I was mentioning that Shell is using. If you have ever read on the internet or you have ever received those type of reports saying future of work 2025, or I don't know, future of media 2030, or future of jobs 2022, I don't know. Those are usually sorry. So like I was saying, let me share with you some details on horizon scanning, one of the most known foresight methodology. In this methodology, what we do is that we look for those factors of change that could be relevant or could have a crucial impact on my business. And we look from technological breakthroughs to regulations, to environmental, to legal, demographic, or media-related factors. The full spectrum we cover. And some of this can be trends, which are factors for which we are reasonably sure about their future development. But other ones can be uncertainties, things we do not know how they will further develop. And I will insist a little bit on trends. There is this in common language, you hear trends a lot of the times used in relation to the fashion industry. Also, if you add trends on Google search, actually the first links that will come up will probably be around fashion or music. And I do not want to disappoint you, but my knowledge is not in that field. I don't know the latest color of what will be the color of the year. or if the miniskirt will be in fashion again. For us, trends are those factors of change that we observe today. So they are emerging today. We see signals on the market today, but they always refer to future developments. We only look in the future for the trends, not in the past. And we look at them from various perspectives. We look, for example, at mega trends. Those are the trends that we observe over a longer time period. And usually they are society orientated. Then we have macro trends, more industry, consumer focused. And then we have specific innovations or novelties that are emerging on the market. And we see them as weak signals on the market. To give you an example on this, we recently did a scan for a technology company, let's say. They were interested in building a strategy for gaining traction in the media industry. And that includes content, entertainment, events. And further to our research, we came up with some key trends to consider and some opportunity platforms. But what I would like to share with you out of this is one trend, just to give you a little bit of more clarity. And I think Yuri was mentioning also a bit on this. My Russian is pretty bad, but I heard some keywords there. So this trend, we call it the real virtual blend. And it actually emerged through initiatives that we've noticed on the market that allowed real and imagined words to collide. Think of how much all this virtual experience economy has grown lately. And what we noticed is that consumers started to show appreciation towards those brands that play at this blurring boundary between real and imagined. And by doing that, allows them to embrace new chances to imagine or to explore, to play. We love to play as human beings. And most importantly, gave them the chance to enjoy some escapism from the real world. And let me share with you some signals that made this trend of blended reality emerge. I think you all guys know Lil Miquela, this computer-generated influencer. Not real, yeah. She has more than 2 million followers on Instagram, and she does a lot of campaigns. But in 2019, she also entered Coachella event, the events world, and she started to interview headlining performance. And let's see if this works.
What's up? It's Michaela here with YouTube Music at Coachella, and I'm joined by J Balvin.
Thank you, Michaela. Nice to meet you. Finally, I've been looking for you everywhere, but it's hard to see you.
All right. Oh, let's just get right into this.
Yeah, so it's hard to see her because she doesn't really exist. Now, coming to the same, so this is one signal, and we have the same event, Coachella, that announced for the 2020 that they will be inviting Miku to their lineup. And Miku is this computer-generated virtual pop artist. It's made by a technology company in Japan. And I'd like you to, for those of you that don't know it, maybe hear a little bit of Miku to give you a sense of. So Miku is not real, right? But all these lights that you see there, all those are real people. And the phenomena is in Asia at least for 10 years, but it actually also came to Europe. I was surprised that last year, all the concerts that she had in Europe, they were sold out very, very fast. So if these two examples were actually fantasy brought into the real world, what we also saw was initiatives the other way around, when real actually invaded virtual. And I think Yuri was mentioning Fortnite, or at least this is what I heard. For example, we had this DJ Marshmello, a pretty known American DJ. He entered the Fortnite game in 2019, and he made history with first ever in-game concert. And then you look also during this year in the pandemic, Travis Scott did the same, and he played for an audience of more than 12 millions. And this is a strong signal to follow. Or another one, in the same cluster of trends, another type of blending realities. We have this artist that has joined an event wearing the world's first 5G-powered augmented reality dress. So all the signals I shared are only a small part of one trend that is relevant for the media industry, for events. There are many more, of course, but I think you get a hang of what we do when we do scanning, the scanning part. And in the scanning, we look for trends, and trends are those factors for which we have some uncertainty. We kind of know how they are driving change in my industry. But then we start looking also into those that we don't know how they will further develop, the uncertainties, right? And is it enough to just have this uncertainty listed or just have them in my mind? Ideally, we should also start to make sense of them and to try to understand how we can prepare if such uncertainty unfolds in one way or another one. And here is where another very known foresight methodology comes in, and that is scenario planning. Now, what I really love about building scenarios for our clients is that it helps them live better with uncertainty. Because at its core, a scenario is a story, and we humans love stories. A scenario is a view of how the future might unfold. And that triggers a lot of imagination, a lot of reflection by challenging the current assumptions that we might have in the known zone. Scenarios, and like I also said at the beginning, they don't deal with prediction. Yeah, they are not predictions. Think of them more like what-if stories used to explore future uncertainties. And just to show you a little bit of the difference, remember that I was mentioning that in general, it's not enough to plan only for one future. This is what you see on the screen, what planning for one future might look like. So we start to extrapolate from what we know today, adding a decrease or increase to it. I don't know, just think of the CEO comes and says, we got a new partnership or a new contract sign-in. So the next year's figures will probably increase with 10%. This is forecast. This is how we plan for one future. Alternatively, what foresight does is that it invites you to allow change and uncertainty into your strategic plans and to develop some alternative scenarios. Now, there are a lot of companies that, now this is a little bit, like black and white. And there are a lot of companies that are actually on the gray zone. They do some scenarios, but maybe they don't do it so methodologically as I presented. But I just wanted to share with you the difference. So how do we build the scenarios? This is not an easy exercise from the beginning, just to tell you that. It's not even an easy exercise when you do it in an offline setting with clients. But my experience shows that it's really worthwhile. So buckle up a little bit and let me take you through this a few steps of how we do scenarios. And for those of you that really enjoy it or really like it, we can further discuss in the separate room. So the first step is that we try to understand for whom are we doing scenarios? What are we interested in? We looked, for example, at the trends for events industry. So let's consider also that one. We have events industry. It's an industry that is strongly hit by the current crisis. We are also now in an event setting where we could have been in Chisinau, but we are now doing it on Zoom. So I would like to develop some scenarios to understand how the future of events would look like. And I choose a year for this, so the time horizon for this. You can, of course, look at future of manufacturing industry in the next 3 years. I don't know, or depending on what industry you are coming from, or looking at the future of work, or more personal, look at future of relationships, or even look at scenarios for my future professional life. Now, next step, once I have this established, like I said before, the reason why we build scenarios is because there is uncertainty. If there will be only certainty, then we don't have to do it. So because there is uncertainty and we need to make a lot of assumptions, then we start building scenarios and prepare for them. So what we do here is we need to identify those factors that are uncertain, and in the same time that they have really great impact on my business or on my topic that I've chosen. And for that, we'll use that horizon scanning methodology that I previously described. And after we identify the trends, then we start to list the critical uncertainties. Now, we said the event industry, right? And I think we heard Draga Stanka at the beginning saying that he still doesn't know how and when to plan for its flagship event, the Upgrade 100. As one of the big uncertainty for this industry and for event organizers is related to the fact that when and if we will be able to take part in large public gatherings. So this is an uncertainty that we can definitely consider. I saw actually last week a drive-in performance in Germany organized by a club, and people were having fun and drinking in their own cars. So this is how the future of events are going to look like. Or another thing that drew my attention, a few days ago, I saw this McKinsey article. They looked on the social attitude of people beyond COVID-19 during March, and they saw that some decreases, some increases. And I think that at this moment, we are not really sure of how this pandemic will affect the attitude of people towards the virus, and how this new attitude might affect our lives, our values, our behaviors. And because this is an uncertain factor, I see at least two ways in which this can unfold. So what I start to do with this uncertainty, I start to polarize it. This is a very important step in building scenarios. So I polarize the uncertainties. And let's take this one that I just mentioned, social attitudes beyond COVID-19. And one of the extremes that it can go is that people remain anxious. We have social distancing becoming norm in our society. And I call this extreme paralyzed, let's say. On the other extreme is that we have people that move on fast. They consider that COVID-19 was maybe an accident of the past. They seek opportunities to gather. Or they even run Corona after parties. And I call that it's in the past. So does this make sense? I go for two plausible extremes. Let's take another one, just very easy example of uncertainty. The same, we have COVID-19 vaccine availability. So we can either have it this year, or maybe we consider that we need more than 12 months to have it readily available. And this is what I do for all my uncertainties. And once I have these uncertainties, once I have the two extreme ways in which they can go, what I do is that I start building the scenarios. The easiest way to build scenarios is by using a 2x2 matrix, like we learn in math. And I take this axis, and in each axis, I put my two uncertainties, each with their two extreme poles. I had the vaccine availability to 2020 on one, and then after 2021, and then the other uncertainty was regarding the social attitude. I had paralyzed on one way, or a think of the past in the other way. And as you can see, I get these 4 quadrants, yeah? So 4 scenarios that I will later start describing and prepare my strategy on them. But before I do that, what helps you, and you have to trust me on this, is that you have to give them some playful, evocative titles that actually captures the sensation of the scenarios. It will help you to easily engage with the stories that you are creating. And let's take the first one, which is the top left scenario, in which people are anxious, but there is a vaccine that will appear on the market. So I just call this one, yes, just give me my shot. Then I move to the right. We get a scenario that sounds good. We have the vaccine. People are getting over the crisis really fast. So it just seems more like we got this break from normal. Next, left side, I have a scenario in which people are anxious. Social distancing is the norm. And we still don't have a vaccine that could help them. So what happens is that people are trying to adapt to these constraints and concerns. So we are witnessing this life in isolation. And the last one, although the vaccine is not here, the level of anxiety drops. The mindset becomes more into the lines of this too shall pass. So what we are doing is that we are living la corona loca. And once we have them like this, with 4 quadrants, 4 names, that what we do is that we have participants writing narratives for them and fleshing out the scenarios. And they have to be consistent and plausible. They have to make sense, both for people creating them, but also for people in the organization or the audience that will read them. So they start asking themselves, what is happening around us in this scenario? What you are doing, what others are doing, or saying, or thinking, or feeling, how they are having fun, how they pay for things. Now, depending also on what industry we are looking at, but there will be some key aspect that you'll cover in each of the scenario. So if I come again to my topic, which was the events industry, I could start describing how the access is done. What will be the venue? In a scenario in which we are witnessing life in isolation, and we have this paralyzed social attitude, and there is no vaccine available, probably we explore more online setting like now. And think of a future newspaper headline saying, Apple runs a press event for the new eye mask in Fortnite. Or that CIA held their annual summit inside the Grand Theft Auto video game. And that attracts much controversy. Or we can also look at the business models. Can there be new ways of monetizing? One narrative here could be, I have venues that are still inaccessible due to the lockdown, and then maybe the TEDx model becomes popular. We have many organizers licensing out their products to be run as smaller, more interactive online sessions. Or I have as an experience sending VR kits to people to get a more immersed conference. I don't know, we just write different narratives. Or you think about topics. We had all this quarantine period. Maybe there will be panels on remote productivity, on localization of supply chains, but also on home baking. So again, depending on the industry, you start to flesh them out. And let me show you some more examples of how the scenarios could look like. This is a Deloitte scenario, which was made for Future of TV in 2025, I think. It's based also on two uncertainties. You see the matrix. One is who will have access to consumers and two poles, and the other one is about the player structure. Or another one that I worked on some 2 years ago on future of travel. As you can see, I named them on festival from all over the world because the sketchy names ensured me an easier engagement with the company that I was working. Of course, if they are of you that have a strong filmography base, then you can use some famous movies that will relate to each scenario. But this is a little bit how the output of such a process will look like. So once you have developed the scenarios, what you try to do is to start to plan for each of the scenario. And you will start thinking, like, how would my company or how would I react if this scenario becomes reality? What is my strategic plan? And you start, what should I invest in? What should I maybe cut, or what should I bring into my organization? And these are your plans. And then what you start doing in the next step is to build a warning system, to build a list of these events that need to happen in order for the scenario to become a reality. Because you want to be the first one that observes that and can anticipate. You don't really want to get into this kind of setting. That things happen and just they pass over you, like a gazelle, and you are standing still. And the last thing that you want to do is to review periodically your scenarios, your action plans. Because actually the value of such an approach increases when it's done periodically. And by doing so, you also enhance the ability to not just observe the future that is happening, but to actively shape it. And when we do this kind of exercises with teams, becomes an exercise that also builds commitment, inspires action. It triggers them to stay alert, to follow closely what happens outside their company, and to inspire continuous learning. Because, when we develop scenarios, that's not the only purpose of the exercise. The exercise frees up thinking, enhances your future views. It just makes you feel more comfortable with uncertainty. And scenarios make sense, actually, because prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. So what we have done is that we have developed this do-it-yourself guide for scenario planning for our clients, as we cannot currently be in their meetings. And we also did the interactive canvas for those of you that are interested in the topic or want to try and give it a more deep dive into it. I can share the canvas. Give me a sign. Now, to conclude on this, if I were to look at the various benefits of our work, I would say like this: foresight. And the entire tools that come with it. They ensure, they help us that we ensure for our clients that they are relevant in the world of tomorrow. And when I say relevant, I mean for both consumers and employees. So how can you remain relevant for the generation entering labor field in 2025? Or what are skills that you need to focus on? And the same goes for consumers. How will retail look in 2025? I don't know. How will real estate look in 2022? Just to give you a few examples. Now, also, foresight helps us to signal those possible changes that may occur in the market. It helps us to mitigate the risk of exposure to the rapid changes in the market. And for these two benefits, the first methodology that I presented, the horizon scanning, is of great use. Next, foresight helps us to think about different alternatives for the future. And here is where I introduced the scenario planning method I just described. What helps is that, and I'm sure all of you or most of you are using Waze or a similar application. Just think of foresight like a Waze for business. So it offers you different routes, and these are the scenarios to reach your destination. It alerts you when on the way there are dangers or changes, and these are the innovations, the novelties that appear. And it helps you reach the desired destination first, before the competitors. And foresight also helps you position as an innovative player who knows and acts on trends and who can become like an influencer in the business environment. Plus, according to a study done last year by the Aarhus Business School, foresight significantly helps profitability, which is, bottom line, that's really helpful. If you are interested in this study, you can scan the QR code and you can get it. Now, with this is kind of finalizing my presentation, I want you to remember that foresight is not about predicting the future, but just investigating. We have horizon scanning that helps us to look on the external environmental changes, and we have scenario planning, a methodology that helps us to build alternative futures and helps us to be better prepared. Foresight is just about being better prepared for the future. Thank you very much for having me. If you want to connect, you can scan the QR code, or I don't know, just check our website and write me an email. Thank you, DCN, for having me.